Sri Sachidananda Sadguru Sainath Maharaj Ki Jai. Ramana Maharshi, his life, Chapter 2, Awakening to the True Self. All this was not a mere intellectual process, but flashed before me vividly as living truth, something which I perceived immediately, without any argument almost. I was something very real, the only real thing in that state. In Madurai, in February 1892, Sundaram Iyer unexpectedly died. He was in his mid 40s. He left behind him his wife Alagammal, their three sons Nagaswamy aged 14, Ramana aged 12, and Nagasundaram aged 6, and their daughter Alamelu aged 4. When Ramana returned from his school at Dindigul to Tiruchile to see his dead father for the last time, he reflected thoroughly. When father is lying here, why do they say that he has gone? One of the elders answered him, if this were your father, would he not receive you with love? So you see, he has gone. The sudden death of the head of the family was a dramatic event which resulted in the family being split up. Alagambal moved to Manamadurai with her younger children Nagasundaram and Alamelu to live with her younger brother-in-law Neliyappa Iyer, who was also working as a pleader. The two older children moved into the house of Subba Iyer, another uncle on the father's side, who lived at number 11 Chokappa Naikan Street near the famous Meenakshi temple. Ramana was sent to Scott's Middle School, later to the American Mission High School. He was an average scholar who learned easily but was not much interested in his lessons. He would often go unprepared to class. If others recited the day's lesson, he would remember enough to enable him to keep up. Later, he told his devotees the following story with regard to his school days. While the school lessons were being taught, lest I should fall asleep, I used to tie a thread to the nail on the wall and tie my hair to it. When the head nods, the thread is pulled tight. That used to wake me up. Otherwise, the teacher used to twist my ears and wake me up. Taken from Nagamma Letters, page number 175. Wrestling, boxing, running, and other sports were much more appealing to Ramana. He was stronger than most boys of his age and his strength and ability even impressed the older boys. He also liked to play football with his friends. People noticed that his team always won. This and other similar occurrences earned him the nickname Tangakai, Golden Hand. It is a title given in Tamil Nadu to people who are always successful in their undertakings. In his uncle's house, there was a room on the upper floor that was largely unused. Here, Ramana used to play throw ball with his friends, with the young Ramana himself as the ball. He would curl himself up into a ball, and the other playmates would throw him from one to another. Sometimes they failed to catch him and he landed on the floor, but he was never hurt by this rough play. This room in which he played is the same room in which he later had his death experience. Sometimes Ramana and his brother would sneak out of the house at night to roam about with their playmates near the Vaigai river or the Pillayar Palyam tank in the outskirts of Madurai. Every night, when the whole house was silent in sleep, Nagaswamy and Ramana, whose beds were in a remote corner of the house, would appropriately adjust their pillows and cover them up with their bed sheets so that it would create the impression of their presence in their beds. It was the duty of little Venkataraman, a younger friend of the same name, to bolt the door of the house when the brothers went out at about 11 p.m. and to admit them on their return at about 4 a.m. Taken from Krishnamurti Iyer Sri Ramana's boyhood in Madurai in Ramana Smriti, page number 58. Ramana did not study Sanskrit or the sacred traditions of Hinduism such as Vedas or Upanishads. In both the schools he attended, he was taught Christianity, but Hindu boys generally show little interest in such Bible classes, and Ramana was no exception in this respect. Although he was very much like any other boy, he did have one peculiar trait. His sleep used to be exceptionally deep. When a relative later visited him at ashram, Ramana recalled the following incident which happened in Dindigul. Your uncle Periyappa Seshayar was living there then. There was some function in house, all went to it, and then in the night went to temple. I was left alone in the house. I was sitting reading in the front room, but after a while I locked the front door and fastened the windows and went to sleep. When they returned from temple, no amount of shouting or banging at the door or window could wake me. At last, they managed to open the door with a key from the opposite house, and then they tried to wake me up by beating me. All the boys beat me to their heart's content, and your uncle did too, but without effect. I knew nothing about it till they told me next morning. The same sort of thing happened to me in Madurai too. The boys didn't dare to touch me when I was awake, but if they had any grudge against me, they would come when I was asleep and carry me wherever they liked and beat me as much as they liked and then put me back to bed. And I would know nothing about it until they told me in the morning. Taken from Mudaliar Day by Day, page number 209. The death experience. The event that heralded Ramana's spiritual awakening was an incident in November 1895, shortly before his 16th birthday according to the Western calculation, his 17th birthday according to Indian calculation. For the first time, he heard mentioned the holy mountain Arunachala, the place to which he would soon set off and where he was to live until his death. Arunachala, translation the Red Mountain on the wide plain of southern India is geologically one of the oldest parts of the earth. For pious Hindus, it is one of the most sacred pilgrimage sites. There is a well known saying in southern India, which the young Ramana also knew, to see Chidambaram, to be born at Tiruvarur, to die at Benares, or even to think of Arunachala is to be assured of liberation. According to Sthala Puranam, in the inmost sanctuary of the temple at Chidambaram is the golden hall with the main sculpture of Shiva Natarajan. Tiruvarur belongs to largest temple complexes in southern India. Benares, Varanasi on the holy Ganges is the town of Shiva and the most holy of all the places of Hindu pilgrimage. At the time, Ramana only knew that Arunachala was a very holy place. He had never connected it with any real place and did not know where the mountain was located. Nevertheless, from childhood onwards, he had been aware of a kind of permanent pulsating repetition, Sphurana of Arunachala, Arunachala, that was both spontaneous and uninterrupted. One day in November 1895, he met an elderly relative, and when he asked him where he was coming from, the answer came back from Arunachala. For the first time, Ramana learned that Arunachala was a real place which one could visit. He further asked where it was situated and received the answer, "What? Do you not know Tiruvannamalai? That is Arunachalam." Of course, the town of Tiruvannamalai was well known to him. Soon thereafter, in middle of July 1896, at the age of 16, the great changes took place in his life. He was at the time a pupil in his final year at secondary school. He later described the incident which changed his life completely and irreversibly. It was about 6 weeks before I left Madurai for good that the great change in my life took place. It was so sudden. One day I sat up alone on the first floor of my uncle's house. I was in my usual health. I seldom had any illness. I was a heavy sleeper. So on that day I sat alone there. There was nothing wrong with my health. But a sudden and unmistakable fear of death seized me. I felt I was going to die. Why I should have so felt cannot now be explained by anything felt in my body, nor could I explain it to myself then. I did not, however, trouble myself to discover if the fear was well grounded. I felt I was going to die, and I at once set about thinking out what I should do. I did not care to consult doctors or elders or even friends. I felt I had to solve the problem myself then and there. The shock of fear of death made me at once introspective or introverted. I said to myself mentally, that is, without uttering the words, now death has come. What does it mean? What is it that is dying? This body dies. I at once dramatized the scene of death. I extended my limbs, held them rigid as though rigor mortis had set in. I imitated a corpse to lend an air of reality to my further investigation. I held my breath and kept my mouth closed, pressing the lips tightly together so that no sound might escape. Let not the word I or any other word be uttered. Well, then, said I to myself, this body is dead. It will be carried stiff to the burning ground and there burnt and reduced to ashes. But with the death of this body, am I dead? Is the body I? This body is silent and inert, but I feel the full force of my personality and even the sound I within myself apart from the body. So, I am a spirit, a thing transcending the body. The material body dies, but the spirit transcending it cannot be touched by death. I am therefore the deathless spirit. All this was not a mere intellectual process, but flashed before me vividly as living truth, something which I perceived immediately without an argument almost. I was something very real, the only real thing in that state, and all the conscious activity that was connected with my body was centered on that. The I or myself was holding the focus of attention by a powerful fascination from that time forwards. Fear of death had vanished once and forever. Absorption in the self has continued from that moment right up to this time. Other thoughts may come and go like the various notes of musician, but the I continues like the basic or fundamental Shruti note which accompanies and blends with all other notes. Whether the body was engaged in talking, reading, or anything else, I was still centered on I. Previous to that crisis, I had no clear perception of myself and was not consciously attracted to it. I had felt no direct perceptible interest in it, much less any permanent disposition to dwell upon it. Taken from Narasimha Swami's Self Realization, page number 20 to 22. Later, it was said on more than one occasion that Ramana's experience had lasted approximately 20 minutes or half an hour, but he himself stressed that there was no concept of time in it. It is also remarkable that afterwards Ramana never harbored any doubts concerning his self realization. The experience remained with him thereafter uninterrupted and was never lost or diminished. He had absolutely no doubts about it and never searched confirmation from a spiritual teacher. He repeatedly stressed in late years that despite the apparent changing phases of his outward life, there was never any change in this experience and he always remained the same. As a result of this death experience, Ramana's life was instantly and totally changed. He reports, when I lay down with limbs outstretched and mentally enacted the death scene and realized that the body would be taken and cremated and yet I would live, some force, call it atmic power, power of Atman, or anything else. Call it Atmic power, power of Atman, or anything else, rose within me and took possession of me. With that, I was reborn and I became a new man. I became indifferent to everything afterwards, having neither likes nor dislikes. Taken from Mudaliar Day by Day, page 41. From now on, he swallowed everything that was served to him, whether delicious or tasteless, good or bad, with no regard to how it tasted or smelled or to its quality. Formerly, if he thought an injustice had been done to him or if other boys teased him, he would stand upon for himself. Now he accepted everything without protest. He was also no longer interested in joining his friends' sporting activities, but rather sat alone and meditated with eyes closed in yogic posture. At school, he started to encounter problems, but he was no longer interested in books. remembered after the death experience, I was living in a different world. How could I turn my attention to books? Before that, I would at least attend to what the other boys repeated and repeat the same myself. But afterwards, I could not do even that. At school, my mind would not dwell on study at all. I would be imagining and expecting God would suddenly drop down from heaven before me. From Mudaliar Day by Day, page 279. Though Ramana told nobody about his great experience and tried to appear as before, other people, of course, noticed the change which had come over him. His elder brother Nagaswami made fun of him and called him a Gnani, enlightened being, or Yogishwara, highest of all yogis, and said mockingly that he would do better to take himself off to some dense primeval forest like the seers, rishis of old. Devotion to God, Bhakti. After the death experience, Bhakti, the loving veneration of and devotion to God, gained in importance for Ramana. Some months before his enlightenment, he had read the first spiritual book in his life, Secular's Periya Puranam, the life story of the 63 Tamil saints. The life story of the 63 Tamil saints Narayanars. Their statues can be found in Meenakshi temple in Madurai. Ancient legends tell how the 63 saints had obtained Shiva's grace and had renounced everything and left home. After his enlightenment, Ramana started to visit the temple regularly. He recalled, "Formerly, I would go there rarely with friends, see the images, put on sacred ashes, sacred vermilion on the forehead, and return home without any perceptible emotion. After the awakening into the new life, I would go almost every evening to the temple. I would go alone, stand before Shiva or Meenakshi or Nataraja or the 63 saints for long periods. I would feel the waves of emotions overcoming me. The former hold on the body had given up by my spirit since it ceased to cherish the idea I am the body. The spirit therefore longed to have a fresh hold and hence frequent visits to temple and the overflow of the soul in profuse tears. This was God's Ishvara's play with the individual spirit. I would stand before Ishvara, the controller of the universe and the destinies of all, the omniscient and the omnipresent, and occasionally pray for the descent of His grace upon me, so that my devotion might increase and become perpetual like that of 63 saints. Mostly, I would not pray at all, but let the deep within flow on and into the deep without. Tears would mark this overflow of the soul and not betoken any particular feeling of pleasure and pain." From Narasimha Swami Self Realization, page 23 FF. During his last month in Madurai, Ramana suffered from an unusual intense pain in his head and a burning sensation. But all the symptoms of his profound change disappeared when he stepped into the temple at Tiruvannamalai for the first time on 1st September 1896. Jai Ramana, Jai Sai Master.